Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Luis. I serve as the director of the Gender and LGBTQIA Center at Elon University. I use they, their pronouns, and my official role for today, in addition to being co-moderator, is being the greeter. So greetings. Thank you for taking the time tonight to be a part of this discussion. And yeah, I'm just gonna pass it off to Roarie.
Hi folks, thanks for spending your evening with us. I'm Roarie Bishop, I use they, them pronouns. If it wasn't for Louise, we wouldn't have this panel, so thank you so much for your time and effort putting this together. At Alamance Arts, we're committed to shaping the cultural identity of Alamance County by making art a tangible presence in the lives of its citizens. A way that I see that happening is by panels like this and by the work that Jade is displaying in the SunTrust Gallery. I would like to also, well, before I give the floor over to Jade, sorry, I usually write notes and so they're a little scattered right now. So before I turn the floor over to Jade, I'd like to break down a little bit of how our time together will be spent. First, Jade will speak on their work, and then we will introduce our panelists and we'll ask them a few prepared questions. And then we'll follow that with anything that the audience may have for either Jade or the panelists. So just some Zoom tips. You have the option of the speaker view or the gallery view, which can be selected at the top right of your screen. The speaker view will display only the window of the person speaking. The gallery view will show all of the windows. If you have a question, we invite you to use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen. We will do your best to address these questions at the end of our time together. We'd also like to invite the audience to continue the conversation in the chat. Please be respectful of each other. Please include your pronouns in your names. You can do this by right-clicking and hitting the rename function. It'll be really helpful for us when we address a particular person's question. And now I'd like to introduce our featured artist, Jade Wilson. Jade is a documentary photographer and video artist, primarily capturing portraits that tell stories of their subject through what feels like their subject's own words. Jade's work has been featured weekly in a segment for Indie called Photo Voice. It was one of these Photo Voice segments that inspired me to reach out to them. Jade's work title is Celebration of Expression, focusing on Black, trans, and gender nonconforming folks. And without giving anything more away, I'll turn this over to Jade.
Hey y'all, thank y'all for having me. I'm super excited. Nice to meet most of y'all virtually. My name is Jade Wilson. I use they, them pronouns. I am currently in Durham, North Carolina. I've been thinking like for a while about what is it that I'm about to talk about for 10 minutes. So I moved to North Carolina when I was almost 14. And I've been here for about 15 years this summer. And I moved here from Oklahoma, a really small town in Oklahoma. And before that, I was born in Kansas in in an even smaller town. So I have this like small town connection. And you know, thinking about when I was younger, who I am today, I did not really see represented, or at least in good light. And so, yeah, I struggled for a while, you know, trying to understand identity. And when I was in college, about 2012, I took my first photography class, and I found a way to like express my feelings and to communicate with people a lot better than I do with exchanging words. So a lot of it was portraits. I started off doing portraits of myself to even just kind of break down the relationship that I had, not only with my body, but also with my mother. And I would also try to bring in people to also kind of talk about some of the same things. So I did that for a bit, and then I graduated and I started working as a corporate photographer, and I was doing that for like 4 years, and it was not fun at all. but there were some fun moments. But yeah, I took a break of like actually expressing myself and expressing like identity. And then I think it was like 2018 maybe, or 2019, probably 2018. I was like, I gotta go back out. I gotta go and be in the streets. I need to tell stories. I need to tell the stories that I feel really connected to. And the stories, you know, at first I think I started off kind of wide with what stories I was telling. And I started with just people in low income neighborhoods. And then, yeah, I started to document folks in their like neighborhood conditions, because I'm especially interested in public housing. I grew up in public housing, and it's terrible. It's terrible for a lot of people. So, and now that I'm like on the other side of that, yeah, I want to talk about the things that are wrong. So I was pretty wide about who I was, you know, anybody. And then I feel like I started to get closer. Then it was just like, all right, Black people. And then, okay, queer people, Black queer people. And now I'm like, okay, Black queer and trans people, getting even more specific, which kind of makes me uncomfortable. Well, at least it used to make me uncomfortable, but I feel a lot better now, because I don't think I celebrate my identities as much or even as loud as I should. And I kind of feel like that's what part of this show is. You know, I have photographed trans and gender nonconforming folks here in the area, and here in the area, and wanted to. My work really focuses on the negative. I am very skilled at bringing out, like talking about what problems are present. And so I'm like, I don't have to do that all the time. And so I wanted to kind of keep things light with the portraits of trans and gender nonconforming people, and just keep it as like a celebratory, we're here, you know, we're alive, and we deserve to be seen. And yeah, I just was thinking that it'd be really cool to just have us on the walls of a gallery, um, just because, like, you know, given how like white gallery spaces are, and I'm in a gallery space, I'm like hoping, well, for one, to make people uncomfortable with my presence. Um, and also, I want kids, little like Black and brown, queer and trans kids, to come in and just be like, wow, like I see myself. And you know, things might be rough right now, but you know, there's a community out there. And I know for me, in terms of thinking about who I saw, it was all on television. And growing up in small towns, I can only imagine what it's like in Alamance County, what queer and trans folks are going through. And yeah, I just wanted space for us to celebrate, because a lot of the times you do hear, and even for myself, I do want to focus on, outside of this, trans stories of public housing. But I'm like, in the meantime, let's have fun, and let's just show off a bit. And yeah, I think that's like how I got to this point of this specific project. My process is kind of like, I don't have like, well, my process is, I really try to like, I'm a documentary photographer, so I actually don't like to have people posed. I don't really like to give direction. I'm like, you know, you just do you, and I'm gonna move around you. Um, and so that's kind of like how a lot of the photographs that I have that are taken, I give very little direction. I just want to show people in their, as they are. And I think, you know, with the media and social media, you have to look a certain way. You have to be like, if you don't look this way, or, you know, if you don't check these boxes, then you're not worthy. And yeah, I'm like, I don't agree with that. And the people that I do talk to, there's always this like, you know, instant kind of negative feeling about being photographed, which is understandable. So my process, I'm really trying to like have people and myself just be a little bit more comfortable. Like, it's just a camera, you know, like, let's just have fun. I know there's so much pressure around image and like what you look like and how people perceive you. So I just try to get people to relax, and yeah, like what I hope that people just trust me, that I will do them well. And you know, how they are is fine. And that's really how I just kind of approach most of my photographs. And yeah, just kind of move. I do very little. I don't really go into Photoshop. I just, you know, do some color correction, and that's it. You know, I want to be as truthful and honest and you know, connected to the person as much as possible. Yeah, I think I talked about the process and the work. I think that's it.
I think that was really great. Thank you for sharing, Jade. There's a couple of comments in the chat, if you don't mind me reading them out loud. Annabelle said, representation is very hard to find in Alamance County. And Bunny has said that loving people as they are, and gave some heart emojis for that. So I think people are resonating with what you're sharing. Now I'd like to introduce the panelists. I'll do a little intro. I apologize, some of this is a little scattered. So if you have a question for any of the panelists, remember, just hit the Q&A with your question. You can find that at the bottom of the screen. We have Detric, uses he, him pronouns, and is the Assistant Director of Student Conduct at Elon. Kiah uses she, her pronouns, and is the Assistant Director at the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Diversity Education at Elon. She's a mother of two. We might be able to hear them. Detric Robinson-Miller uses he, his pronouns, and is the Assistant Director for Race, Ethnicity, Diversity Education at Elon. Paige Wilson uses she, their pronouns, and is a junior at Elon, is majoring in human service studies and minoring in psychology. Wow. And now we're going to open up to, in case any of the panelists would like to add anything to their introduction, and then we'll go into the questions.
I'll just put it out there that we're married. That's why we're in the same room, same last name. We're here.
Paige, you're muted.
Sorry, my roommate was trying to come in.
I was going to put out that me and John are also house parents, and so we are together as well. And Paige is one of our children, and so yeah, Detric, I guess you're there, but that's fine.
Alrighty, so this part will be our moderated discussion part. So we have some like predetermined, thought out questions for the panelists. But one of the things that Roarie and I had really talked about and shared with the panelists was just how this is supposed to be more of a discussion than anything, right? Q&A, like it just feels really one-sided in some ways. And so while definitely gonna have the first question and kicking us off, wanting to just invite, you know, y'all to talk to one another and respond in that way. Also before starting, I just wanted to extend my gratitude to all the panelists. They are rock stars. in their own way. And I could probably do an intro on each and every one of them. I will say left out of Paige's bio is photographer and an aspiring photographer and is doing some amazing things. So, but yeah, to kind of kick us off in our panel discussion, we want to hear from you all. How would you all define representation and what informs your definition and view of representation?
So I can start. So I remember like when representation, quote unquote, was like the word, and I mean that like in both academia and just like in the general public, right? Like communities of color, queer communities, like people were like, we would like to be seen. We would like our stories to be told, and not for them to be always the pain story, for not them to always be the suffering story, and for them to also no longer be done and for white gays or done by white people, right? Like every time there's like a movie, it's like, who is this for? Even sometimes when it's done, and I'll get that's a different thing. But like, I remember all we asked for is like, where are we in these stories? Like, where are we in the things? And white supremacy was like, okay, you want representation? Here you go. And like, for Black women, you get beige, biracial, loose curl, cis women in everything. For queer folks, you get straight people playing queer folks. Like, that's what you get. Dark-skinned people, don't ask us for nothing. Muslims, you get terrorists or nothing. Latinos, it's Latinx folks, it's a border. Like, you're all crossing a border. It does not matter. And like, here's your representation, and happy. And it was like, I felt like we were specific. Like, I felt like we were very specific about what we wanted, right? Like, and so when I think about representation, like the word, it makes me cringe because it has gone so far from what we asked for, like what we are asking for, because it has been digested and spit back out by the white supremacy machine and said, well, this is what you get to have. And if you ask for more, or if you ask for different, then it's, why isn't this good enough? Is this not enough? Like, isn't this what you said? And so it bothers me, like the word representation now bothers me, because I'm like, I no longer want representation. Like, I don't want it anymore. Like, this is not it. And so I personally will be like, you know, that pretty much informs like when I'm hearing representation. And so I've actively had to go outside of like the major spaces if I want to see folks like me, like myself. Yes, you can have a graham cracker. Sorry. Because I'm not going to get it from these other spaces. And I even have to be careful when it's us in those spaces, because it also can always be damaging. Because there are folks who say that they're making things for us, and then it's still for the white gays. So really have to go outside of that to find me or folks like me in anything. So it's a real journey and challenge, but I find when I do, beautiful things and beautiful folks.
For me, I think a lot about, it's funny because I just posted about representation today, and kind of going off of what Kiah said, my general thought is all representation ain't good representation. And, you know, specifically lately regarding our political climate, our national culture, I've been thinking a lot about what good representation means, and even thinking through the structures of, we can go white supremacy, heteronormativity, how certain folks are selected to be the voices in these spaces as well, that are strategically positioned to undermine progress, or just say, hey, we have the Black, or we have the person that can represent, you know, queer identity, or what have you. And for folks to expect that that's okay is really, really frustrating. So, when I'm thinking about representation, it really falls on having voices and spaces that truly are there to move the bar forward and push back and challenge. And oftentimes that comes at great personal risk for those folks. So it is one of those things that is also really difficult. And, as I'm moving forward, I am hopeful that more folks take the risk. It shouldn't be that, it shouldn't have to be like that. But I want to know that folks are in spaces that are making folks with dominant identities uncomfortable, because they need to be placed in uncomfortable positions to really push back against the problematic cultures that they are perpetuating and facilitating and in many instances creating.
You wanted to like poetry to me. Wow, okay. I'm gonna say something less eloquent. So for me, I think that representation means like seeing parts of my soul, right? Like I think it is one thing to see Black people, but I think it's like a part of my soul is Black, like a part of my soul is queer, like being able to see that and resonate with it and resonate with a part of my story, right? So I think that is beyond what it looks like. It really is what it feels like. Like, is it in the same spirit as my soul? And I think like that's what I really, really care about as far as like representation and like, so I remember that I was fortunate enough to bring Jade and Gemini into creating an art gallery at my previous job. And I just remember looking at hundreds of Jade's photos and just seeing Black queer people with joy, and they were just living life. And I was like, it's different than just seeing folks who I can imagine to be Black or imagine to be queer, but really seeing them just in it, doing the same moves that I do, doing the same poses that I do, like that resonated with my soul. And I think that's the representation that we're craving. It's to see ourselves reflected, not only kind of this like phenotypically fake facade, but like to see us, to see the folks who, were raised by single mothers, to see the folks who live with their grandparents and great grandparents, to see the folks who, we understand had a terrible time in engaging with their queerness, but also the folks who have found joy in their queerness. And I think all of that is the representation that we crave. And I think that takes honest listening. And I think that much like to what Detric was saying and what Kiah was saying, is what a lot of folks just get the snapshot. They get the picture and not the context. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
John, something I was thinking about with what you shared, you were talking before about the event that you did at your old job and you brought Jade and Gemini. I think also about putting representation in certain spaces. I think you touched a little bit upon it, but it made me think about how the medium in which exists, the space where we are represented, I think also says something, right? And for me, I am so thankful to have like Roarie in their position, to have this type of conversation, queer people of color, queer and trans people of color on a Zoom virtual call. And like, we're taking up digital space, and that's really important too. And for me, I had not really thought about representation in certain spaces until one of my colleagues and comrades who's on this call, Kimberly Williams, did an exhibit on Black love. And to see Black love in a student art gallery with Black students who never would have thought to step into a space and see themselves reflected was super powerful. And so that's why when Roarie came and called and got connected with me, it was like, we are bringing Jade's work to Alamance Arts. I think I've been telling everyone. I was like, I don't know if you know about this person, Roarie, and the work that they're doing, but this is really important. And I know I've talked to a couple of folks who are on this call. I'm thinking of like Annabelle, who made that comment around representation in Alamance County. So anyway, it's a very long response to some of the things that you shared, but any of the other panelists in terms of this idea of what representation is, and do we like it? Do we not like it?
So for me, there was a lot that y'all said that I like deeply connected with. Representation is I feel like a strange thing to like ask or demand. And I think I'm at the part where it's like, I'm not asking, you know, like we are creating this space. We are going to take up space. And I think even just doing that, even just in action of showing people to even, maybe it'll empower somebody to, you know, just step out a little bit, you know, and and assess their own risk levels. And I think with representation, it is a little, there's a safety thing. There's safety in being visible. And I kind of struggle with that a little bit because I am, so I just left my part-time job at Indie Week as a staff photographer, and you know, I'm trans, and they never had well, one, I think I was the first Black person to work there as a staff photographer, and then, you know, I come in there trans, and that is very rarely represented in newsrooms. And there's a lot of reasons as to why. And I think safety is a big part of that. Cause sometimes I feel like I need to like hide part or just not say anything. And just kind of keep it moving. And the more, I don't know, the more visible I do become, the more I do worry about my safety. And it just, I feel like if I have the things in place that I need in terms of what I need to be safe, then I'm going to continue to just to step out. And you know, like fear is always going to be there. People are always going to, I don't know, come at us in whatever way they do. And I'm just trying not to like let that stop me. Because I know, like, I feel like representation is bigger than just our own individual selves. Like, we don't know who we're reaching, and sometimes it feels like, yeah, we need to be represented, and it's like there is so many ways to just be, and you know, it's just like a character that people are always trying to fill, when it's just like, why can't we just be in it? You know, like why you got to have the queer character? Why can't we, you know, just be the I don't know, like the CEO or something? Like why does that, like why can't we just be there? So yeah, I struggle with representation a lot.
I think you brought up a really good point, like the point about safety. So like I know, I think you're right. Like if there were more spaces where folks were like, look, we're here, like it is what it is. Like it is what it is. Then maybe I can speak from my experience, like maybe I wouldn't have had to struggle with a lot of like my intersections of identity. Because I was always like it's safe there if I act like this, and it's safe there if I act like this, and then it's safe there if I act like this or don't act like that. And I think it was like at my last institution, like right around when I was leaving, like I had decided, I was like, like, because I was like in a space that was in academic, institutional, and served like my religious community. And I was like, look, I come to work and I gotta go. But I said something to one of my students and she was like, are you? And I was like, are you? Like we did that. Everybody was like this. And I was like, you know what? because it didn't feel like a space that was safe, right? And then I decided, I was like, but what if I'm just, excuse you, go. If I just was like, yeah, I'm here, like, what is it? Like, what are we gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do? Because first of all, you're not gonna fight me. Because if you do, I'm always about that action. So what is it gonna be? And like, it did get interesting because people were like, you do a lot of work with an last institution, like their LGBTQIA office, about like making queer religious spaces. And I was like, yeah, I do that. And they were like, I just don't understand, like, why is that necessary? Why is that needed? And I was like, but why isn't it needed? Like, why can't we do that? Like, babies need to, so like, I made prayer spaces tend to be gendered. And so like, I made a third non-gendered space for folks to pray. And I was like, you can do what you feel. Like, don't feel like you have to tell me which space you're gonna pray in, like, just pray, because that's like, at the end of the day, like what we're required. And like, I got a lot of pushback from folks. They were like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, this has existed in our communities for forever. And colonization will have you thinking that it didn't, because we've existed forever, and colonization will have you feeling like we didn't. And it was in that moment that I was like, you know what? Safety be damned, because so many other children came to me and were like, this is the first time somebody has seen me, has made space for me, has said that I get to be here. I've wanted to leave my community. I've wanted to leave my family. I've wanted to like leave my home. I've wanted to leave this earth. But you made space for me. And I was like, if that means that I put me as the face of these things, and I'm the person who is, you know, quote unquote in harm's way, like, I got to do that, because there's somebody else who's like, who can't do that, but for whom like that meant so much. And had somebody maybe done that for me, like, maybe I wouldn't have had to be like, well, let me pick and choose like what part of my identities I'm gonna deal with on this fine Monday or Tuesday or whatever, instead of just being able to be myself and just exist. So I think you're right. Like, at some point we got to be like, those of us who can be like, how PG is this call? I gotta think. F it. Like, some of us have to be like, F it, so that folks behind us can be able to have the same opportunity to engage in a space where they may not be able to say F it, but one of us did it first.
Paige, I want to invite you into the space and share your thoughts on representation.
I've been listening to everyone's response, and I honestly, like, I think that I resonate with a lot of what everyone is saying, just as far as representation, kind of just like the word nowadays just being so like overplayed, and kind of, you know, when you say it so much and you have so many people saying it so much all the time, then like it kind of loses its value, it kind of loses its meaning. So I do think that that is kind of unfortunately happening, and it's happening with like a couple of words that, you know, like diversity, like inclusivity, like things like that. So I think that's kind of inevitable because it's gaining so much traction and because people are talking about it. So I guess like in a way, if you look at it like that way, it's like, at least people are noticing, you know, like at least people are talking about it, at least, you know, so many people are talking about it that other like companies or organizations kind of like feel like, oh, maybe I should put out something, you know, so that I can stay in the, I guess, like society's eye. And not to say like that's not, you know, like it's like bittersweet. Like you got to kind of like take the good with the bad. It's like, that's kind of not so great thinking, but at the same time, it's getting things done. So in a way, like keep it up, you know, like keep on using representation and like diversity and all those words, because like some change is starting to happen. Like I'm noticing it, I'm only 21. So it's like, I know that like other people who have lived longer than me are seeing like, wow, like my mom, like when I talk to her about these things, it's like she tells me, her and my big mama, we all talk, her mom's mom, about just like how it was like for them growing up. And then it's like my mom says her stories, and then like we talk about like how I am, and it's just like it makes a difference, you know, in a way. So I have kind of a bittersweet relationship with the term.
I appreciate what you shared, Paige, because for me, I think about like representation invites people in, and kind of keeps what's what I'm looking for, like keeps the pressure on almost. And then I think about Jade's comment, and Detric touched upon this too, about people's presence being uncomfortable or just kind of like pushes things forward. And I think pushing people forward is helpful, right? In the sense of just kind of like, okay, well, nothing existed and now something exists. But I think one of the things that we're kind of, I'm hearing from your all's comments is like this something that exists now with representation is nuanced, it's not simply good, it's not bad, it's in the gray. And so, yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I'm just kind of left thinking about. But any other comments or thoughts with this before Roarie takes us to the next question?
I think we've touched on it, and I think particularly because of the work that we all do, I think that we don't oftentimes talk about the responsibility of representation. Like you start to identify yourself and you start to grow into yourself, and then in the beginning you're afraid that people can see you, and then people can see you. And then people are like, oh, well, I see a part of me in you. How did you get there? And you're like, I'm still figuring me out. Like, I don't know what this is. And I think particularly, I don't know if you felt this way, but like, I think about like the moment we got married, I've somehow ascended in gay status. Like I became like an elder gay, and like, because I mean, think about the married couples that you see, right, in any queerness. And for some reason, folks think that because we've decided to love each other, we have the blueprint on how everybody should love each other. And I'm like, we're still trying to exist. Like, we're just two like Black men trying to like love each other, and like the world is still the world, but like it means so much. So I think like I really think that like Kiah was really touching on like just the responsibilities of representation. I think that's something that you get on the other side. Like once you like, start doing the work and start creating those spaces, you really start to understand, oh, other people are looking at me, and not only for bad things, but for good things too. I don't know if I have the answer for you though. Like, and that dynamic introduces another kind of responsibility that's like, well, am I disappointing people if I don't? And like, I feel like that's a part of my job now, right? Like in the work that I do get to coach people through that. But for the people who are just trying to only exist, like, wow.
These are really great answers. Thank you all. I'd love to invite our guests to share from their experiences. What was your earliest memory of seeing yourself represented, either in media or in your life? It could be a book or a movie or a person.
I'll start this off. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. My very first like exposure to the trans experience was watching Boys Don't Cry, and A Girl Like Me, the Gwen Araujo story. And it's torture, it's death, it's like, if this is who you are, you don't deserve to be here on this earth. And I was just like, I'ma just lock this away because I don't want to die for being myself, which, as I'm like currently today, hiding myself is what was killing me. you know, is what made me feel like I was less than. And yeah, I wish that I had, I'm sure there, when around that time when those movies came out, that there was probably also something positive, but it's not accessible. And that's like the real thing about, I feel like, as far as representation, is it accessible? Are people even able to receive the message? And who's telling these stories? Is it trans folks telling other trans stories? Who is the person that's telling the stories? And I feel so like driven to stay in media, because I don't see people who look like me doing similar work. I mean, I do, but it's just very few. And so I do feel it's an honor to, like, you know, be out here, and you know, I feel like I just like passing the baton, that, you know, and getting more connected to my ancestors, because they were here, and, you know, we just making the work look, you know, for our times. And yeah, I really wish that, you know, I just wanted to see better. I wanted to see more. I just didn't want to see the pain and the death, and, you know, and but that's a very real thing that happens, and we do need to talk about it. And, you know, when you're like 10, maybe you shouldn't be watching, you know, something about death, because that really changes things, and how people around you make you feel. And now I'm like, I want to live my life as loud as I can, as a trans non-binary person. Just even seeing the trans experience, it's like, you know, either you're gonna be this way, you're gonna be that way. And it's like, wait, you know, like, we don't even, you know, there are trans folks who don't even medically transition. And like, there's just such a spectrum. And we should have access to seeing all those spectrums, so that we could, I don't know, get closer to who we are.
I can go. I saw, I think that the first time I saw representation of, I'm gonna say that the queer experience, because honestly, it was just like the QT-POC experience was just not visible to me until I got to college. But the first time I kind of like saw representation within the queer community was through BuzzFeed, which is not the best teacher, surprisingly. And those BuzzFeed videos on YouTube, I would spend all hours of the night just like on my phone trying to, like, I don't know, just figure it out. And it's just, that wasn't really like the best representation that I could have had, especially as a Black person. The kind of other representation I would have is like the music that I would listen to. And I did grow up in a very like white community. So that was very like, I had a very huge like identity crisis in high school, because I was just so lost and confused, and I thought that I understood things that I really didn't understand. And it was just like a very awkward time that could have very easily been avoided if the accurate representation was there. Like, I strongly believe if, you know, I saw more like QT-POC casts, or like listen to more QT-POC folks who like have music and stuff and like singing about that stuff, but also just like being a person and creating something that like I enjoy, would have been, you know, would have made me like figuring out myself, I feel like, more smooth of a transition. I had a very bumpy ride. I feel like I'm still on that ride. But yeah, I feel like it would have been way easier if I had just had that simple representation.
What? Oh, okay, yeah. we have to have a conversation about who's gonna go, and
So
so I think that for me, very vividly, I think the first kind of queer representation that I remember is Will and Grace. And it was very like, and no matter how funny, it's very white, it's very campy, it's very like cool, and I have a different appreciation for it as an adult, but like for that to be like what I see, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really that because but okay, cool. And then I think the next, what I saw a bit of a fullness is Noah's Ark. And Noah's Ark is set on Black folks, generally folks of color, just really living their life. And it really does capture kind of all aspects of how you show up. And like, but I also remember like very vividly having to like watch it in secret and having to like, have my laptop, and I think it was on Netflix, and now it's no longer on Netflix, and now it's only behind a paywall. And like, so I think that there's so much, I think that's the first kind of real representation that I saw that I can be like, oh, there's a range to this. And then I was like, oh, now I have to find out where I fit in that range. Okay, cool. I'll try some things out, feel how it feels in my body. But I was able to see it and say like, oh, okay, great. And Degrassi, strangely, because back in the day, Degrassi really had the storylines, right? And really had queerness. And like Marco was like I remember watching Degrassi and then being like, oh, and like I came out to my first person, which was my best friend at the time, because like of like Marco's coming out process. And I was like, oh, okay, here we are.
I guess not to follow up on all that. So I was like, ooh, thinking about this question, and the earliest thing that I actually can remember, Holiday Heart. I don't know if y'all have ever seen or watched it. I even looked back, I was 10, if the date served me right. But for those of you who haven't seen it, I remember, I know I watched it with my family. I remember it being about a Black gay drag queen, complex family dynamics, partner died. All of the nice, sad stories that they typically give occurred in that film. But I think one of the things that I'm thinking about now sitting in on this panel is, at 10, there was like this strange connection to this character without even having words for it, because I just didn't think that far into it. But seeing, and I can't even say it was like a happy storyline, because it wasn't. Like, even now, without remembering the plot of that movie, like specifically, I know that I didn't walk away from that movie feeling good. Very dark colors, blues and hues, but also thinking about kind of that profound impact, because I like every once in a while, I like growing up, even to this day, I'll be like, ooh, Holiday Heart, and I would just kind of keep moving. And yeah, so I just wanted to share that as my story.
I'll share that, like, I don't have it. So first of all, Degrassi, whatever it takes, okay? I'm gonna make it through. And Will and Grace is and will always be. I literally worked uptown near that building and like got off the train early to go walk to like be at the building where they lived. Because yes, but I don't really like. It's so funny. It wasn't until like I was older that folks were like, okay, so like you were tapped into like all of it, like Degrassi, the Wills and Grace, me and Sailor Moon. Like Luis and I were talking about Sailor Moon today, and I was like, let me give you the rundown of my top faves, and all my top faves are the gayest ones. And I was like, we should have known. But like, I grew up in a house that wasn't really a conversation. So like when I was looking, like I was operating in these spaces, like you know, I grew up in the 90s, so like there were Black shows. So I saw that, like Living Single and A Different World, like that was part of like my identity and my experience. And so, but I never really looked outside because my parents did such a good job of like being like, you don't need to like, they showed me what like being like Caribbean, being Afro Latinx, like what that meant. It wasn't the other part, the person really who I probably was watching the most was my cousin Courtney, because my cousin Courtney, I have known Courtney from the gate. Like, you know, she's only 2 years older than me. And like, before I had language, I was like, oh, Courtney don't like boys. Don't talk to her. She don't like boys. She don't, no. It's so cute. You want to give her flowers. She don't like boys. And like, my family was like, you don't know that. It's a phase. I was like, it's not. And like, so watching Courtney go through that, it was kind of like, and watching people kind of dismiss, you know, especially in a West Indian house, her experience, I remember like being like, well, I guess then I should just mind my business, because if Courtney a full lesbian and I'm bi, they're gonna be like, oh, that's even more of a phase. Like, you're playing games. And so I didn't really look for much. Now there was always stuff, and I was always like, oh, okay. But I'll say like the first time that I was like, you know, especially being from like New York, New Jersey, like it was always there. It wasn't like I had to search as hard as other folks maybe, but I remember watching Paris is Burning and like open mouth weeping, like for many reasons. And being like, first of all, I know where all of this is, you know what I'm saying? I've been on all these streets, I've been in all these places, and just being like, wow, like it's right there. Like I could have been touching this part and this history and this part of me for so long, and I just didn't, because like it wasn't available to me because of the way my family is set up. And so, and the fact that I have entered other spaces, like I grew up Christian and I'm Muslim now, and so like that was already a transition. Like I had to pick and choose like what part of my identity I was gonna put in the front and deal with. It was too much all at the same time. Like, so things that I could put to the side, I would. But as far as like Paris is Burning, I remember having a moment with that. And like, I watched that so many times, like over and over, because it was just like, there's just something about it. And I mean, it is one of my favorite films to this day. And I know like all of the words and everything. And then, but that was like the first time that I really saw something and was like, okay. And it wasn't until later that I had conversations and people were like, yeah, no, like your crush on Sailor Saturn, like should have told you, like your crush on Sailor Pluto should have told you. You know, you was watching Degrassi extra close. You should have been able to tap in, sis. I was like, what are you talking about? So I just didn't feel like I really had a formative moment outside of watching Paris is Burning. But what I will say is, while I didn't necessarily like have something where I saw myself, the first time I had somebody see me was my partner. And it was like, I had never had that. And like, we were like at the movies or something. And he was like, oh, it's so cool. He was like, oh, so you're bi, like, that's cool. Like, and like kept talking. And I was like, excuse me? What is this? What are you saying? What are you saying? Who told you? What is that? What is that? And he was like, is that a secret? Should we not talk about this? And I was like, why? How do you know this? And he was like, do you see yourself? Have you ever seen yourself? And I was like, mind your business. Mind your business. And he was like, okay, cool. But like, okay. And I had never been seen before. And I like, between like that was a moment I was like, wow, okay. So like, I just exist. Like, and people like, I just exist. And for it to come from, you know, this person in like just such a casual way of being like, oh, okay, that's cool. And I was just like, does my parents know? Does everybody know? But like, what is happening? Was really like that was the most seen I've ever felt in my life, because I didn't say anything, and he was just like he kept walking, and I was just like, this feels like we should fight. Like, what is this? And so like I feel like that was the first time I've ever felt seen, and so after that I was like, oh, okay, people can see me, and I guess I can look. That might have been the issue, is like that nobody saw me, so I wasn't looking for myself. Because it wasn't until after that moment that I really was like, oh, okay. And I was like 17, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I guess this, okay. And so then I began looking into these other things, and I really think probably, if I think about it, it took that moment of him seeing me for me to be able to be like, it's okay to see myself.
So that's a really great answer. It kind of leads into or segues into our next thing. I was going to ask, in what spaces have you felt seen, and what does that feel like?
It feels like fighting. I don't like it. I did not like it. It's like, there's like a thing like where people are like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be perceived. They're like, I want to exist, I don't want to be perceived. And I was like, for a long time, I was like, why don't like I'm here and I'm very loud and I'm very charismatic, and that's fine, but don't like see me. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't actually perceive me. Don't get into this, because yes, I'm loud, and yes, I'm out there, and yes, I'm like the first one to, you know, put on Nuck If You Buck and all of that, but like, don't perceive me. And so it felt very like, not like violating, but like lightning had struck, like, and like, I was just like, what does this mean? I don't know what if I like it. Yeah, but now when people see me, I think I still struggle, because my community is not super like accepting. And any of them. So sometimes it's still uncomfortable, until I'm in a place where somebody's like, are you? And I'm like, are you? And we do that. And it's like, okay, all right. And we see each other, and like, we don't have to do anything but that. And then like in those moments I love, but I'm not super seen in other spaces, because it's still back to that safety thing. I just don't know that it's always like safe, but yeah.
So it sounds like being seen feels vulnerable unless that person relates to the part that you're sharing. Is that it? Cool.
Yeah, that's the word. Let me write that down for my therapist, because we'd be working on the vulnerable part, and I'd be like, mind your business. Mind you, I pay this person, but I don't like it. We've just unpacked. I wasn't ready for this. Okay.
Sorry.
Yo, I deeply feel that. I get upset like when people yeah, I'm ready to fight, and I'm trying not to be that way, because being seen is very beautiful. It's and I think that's the part that I want to fight, because I've my childhood, me being visible meant I was going to get hit, or something bad was going to happen. So I like struggled with, okay, I feel invisible, and I'm like, dang, does nobody see me? Like and then also I'm like, okay, I just want a couple people to see me, but also don't say anything to me. And just like, look at me from afar, or I don't know. I think I really try to have a lot of control over how people see me. And I'm trying to like accept that I really don't have control of that. And people are going to, move how they move. And I'm really trying to be accepting of being seen, but that vulnerability, it just kind of makes me go inward even more. And I'm like trying to actively fight against that, because who doesn't want to be seen? Like everybody wants to be seen, everybody wants to be loved, like everybody wants to know that their life matters. And if you go on a very long time of nobody saying that, and then people start telling you that like your life matters, you're like, wait, does it really? And you know, sometimes it does take somebody to see you for you to see yourself, for you to even begin that process of like, okay, at least one person, you know. And then now I'm like, I need to work on seeing myself, because I do feel like that is the number one opinion that I care about is how I see myself. And yeah, if it's not in good light, or if I do see the negative, trying to, you know, shift it in whatever way. But yeah, being seen is it's cool. And I'm an introvert, and I often, even like this, you know, panel discussion, I'm like, okay, people are going to see me. I can't stop my video. It's just, it kind of, I'm still in that I'm just uncomfortable. But then also I'm loud, and it's hard not to see me. It's really hard not to see me. So I know I struggle a lot with that, and I'm trying to just really lean into it, you know, my Leo rising, you know, that I am here to be seen. So I just need to move like that.
I really appreciate Kiah, you and Jade for bringing up like the feeling seen piece, especially as it relates to seeing yourself, because you know, one, like that's an area that I continue to struggle with, and sometimes I ask myself that question, like, you know, who would I be if you know, I wasn't socialized by the world, basically, right? So you know, I think about even some of the comments that John will make where I like be like joyfully dancing, and then he'll notice me and I'll just stop, and I'm like, oh, like he can't see that. Like, so I navigate you know, these spaces a lot with the idea that people are always watching, so I need to act in a certain type of way. So when I see, you know, what does it feel like to be seen, I always honestly connect that to being watched, which then pulls me back into this space where, okay, you can't be, you know, too gay, you can't be too black, can't be too joyful, like all of these things where, you know, I'm not really in those moments enjoying the joy for myself, but trying to exist for others. Like, to be real, sorry, I act very different when I'm alone in the house because I do just a whole bunch of random eclectic things. But I say that because even with my partner, there's still these barriers and walls that I wouldn't say I'm not ready to tear them down yet. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm able to yet. And I see a therapist. I highly recommend it. We're working through it. You know, one of the pieces that that has been resonating for me a lot in my sessions is I stay in my head a lot. And, you know, it's really hard for folks to see or know what I'm thinking because they're not in my head and I'm not letting in there, when those pieces are really important to understand more about who I am and what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. I will say, like, space-wise, it's been difficult, right? So I think that I try to be as authentic as possible in spaces. You know, I'm seen in my workspace, my home space, as this like happy, like go-lucky person, which, you know, generally I'm pretty happy. And there are also things that piss me the hell off. Excuse my language, but piss me off. And you know, even through those things, sometimes articulating that is difficult because I don't know what the reaction's going to be. I don't know if folks are ready to see that part of me when I'm not bringing, you know, 100% of my 50%, or when I'm not smiling or laughing. Like, you know, can you, like, when I have my strong resting face with my eyebrows curled, are you ready for that too? Or is that going to make you a little bit uncomfortable, especially now that if you don't hear my voice and vocalize where you like, he might be gay, I notice people walk in directions, especially now that I have hair. So there are a whole bunch of pieces there. But I will say one of the most, I think there are a couple of instances where I really felt a genuine joy when I think about being seen. One of them was early in my coming out process where I don't think I was ready to come out, but you know, parents got that perception, and my mom was like, so why haven't you bought a girls' home yet? Or why don't you have a girlfriend? I was like, oh, I'm not ready for this conversation. And we had it. And the thing that was so helpful in that moment though, and I've never, you know, shared this out loud, my sister-in-law reached out to me to, you know, give that encouragement and support, kind of really initially, and help talk me through some of the initial feelings. And then I would say the two people that were so impactful to me in that moment was my nephew and my niece, when they reached out and supported me during that moment very early on. And I still think about that because that was like that one moment where I was so scared and nervous. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. And yet I had these three people that were so close to me, that showed me love in that moment. And not to say that, you know, my parents were, bad at it, because I think they did really good. And, you know, we have a super close relationship. But I vividly remember how I felt in that moment when my sister-in-law, Tweety, my nephew Brantley, and my niece Jazz, when they reached out to me, and that continues to be meaningful.
Yeah, I convinced enough people that I was straight, but I've always gotten the narrative, is he? And I did the stereotypical gay gesture for our folks that may be seeing impaired. And I think for me, it was weird because in my mind, I was like, absolutely not. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, you can see me. And then, so like, there's that weird juxtaposition there. And like, I remember I was in college, I was graduating, and I had like kind of all throughout college, like my Black identity was my most salient, my most like kind of upright. You don't know me being Black. And then like my queerness was like somewhere in there, but like but I remember that like for some reason I signed up for Lab Grad. I was doing all this social justice work. Like I signed up for Lab Grad, which is Lavender Graduation, which is a graduation ceremony for the LGBTQIA community. And I remember like my mentor, like my top girl, like she is my ace. Like she is like weird. She is the thing that like inspired me to go into like the field of working with folks. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to Lavender graduation to support you. And I was like, did I just come out to the campus? And like it just didn't, I think that was just like living life, that I didn't think about it. I was just like, oh yeah, cool. And then like, I think that really like sparked a time that I was just like, I realized it didn't matter to me. Like I realized, and then you get to the point where like you're coming out, and then you get to the point where you're like, oh, I didn't tell you, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm gay. All right, let's move on with life. And like, you kind of slowly kind of get there. And then I would say now, I think that I've crafted spaces where I feel seen, because the consequence is too high for me not to. The consequence is too high for me to not be myself. I've built my literal career on empowering other people to be seen, to whoever they are on the inside, to like make space for themselves, and then to actually like get there. So like I think about like at work now, like when I applied for the job that I currently have, Like I had on a dashiki, a blazer, and these 2 flags in the background. And that was welcomed, right? Like my supervisor welcomed it. He encouraged it. And then like I walk into like day 1 and there's Kiah. Like, and like now, like I think about how important it is for me, but how important it is that I can show up. I could like nobody, like my supervisor now says nothing. Like I got my nose pierced, which is like queer coded, and like he was like, he didn't say anything. I come in with like nail polish, I come in with dusters, I come in with like all my things, and everybody's just like, okay, that's John. And like that is a way of feeling seen. Like I never have to explain myself. I never have to, like, people ask questions, but they're genuinely curious about my exploration. And I think that's one of those key things to feel seen. And particularly it's important for me to model that, for me to model what it is to feel seen and be seen. So I think about the Kiki ball that the GLC just threw, which was amazing, by the way. I always have to shout out Luis and their work, and whole teamwork. But Kiah and I were house parents and dressed in full drag at work and like showed up and won a category. But that's me showing up, right? That's me feeling seen. That's me saying, I don't have to separate myself. I am who I am, where I am. And if you don't like it, you have only a few options, but all of those options have very little to do with me. So do what you will with that. But I also think like it was about making those small decisions to be seen, to be okay with feeling seen, to sit with the discomfort of what it was to feel seen, and to say like, the thing that makes me John, the thing that makes me special is in my queerness. It is in my Blackness. It is in that the extraness that I want to hide from people. That's my thing. That's the person that I am. And to make space and get out of my own way so that person can, just leap out and, be that big personality, is what it feels like to be seen for me. It feels to not always have to do all that navigating and like, should I do this? Should I wear this? Should I carry my books this way? Can I not wear these pants? Can I not wear this color? Can I not Can I not so on the same day that I had to do the drag, I also had to have a interview with the chief of police, and I had to do it in drag. And I was like, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I'm supporting a campus program. You wanted to have this meeting at this time. This is what you get. And I think like that was a surprise to me, right? A surprise that I could do it. And now I care even less. Like, make more space for me so I have more space to grow into who I am.
I am gonna put on my theater kid hat and my stage manager hat on, and point out the fact that it's 7:15. So we only have about 15 minutes left, which is wild. And so I'm gonna adjust our schedule a little bit. I'm gonna pause here for audience questions. And then the last question that we'll ask y'all, and I'm gonna ask y'all to condense your answer. So in one sentence, so we'll do the audience question and then we'll come back for the answer to the last question. But in one sentence, what advice would you have for your younger self? So that'll be, take a moment to think about that. But I want to pause at this moment and ask for any audience questions. I do see one in the Q&A. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask that, but then invite folks to share other questions as well. So this is from a anonymous attendee, but what do you all want a traditional white 50-year-old female to take away from this session? Please help me understand so I may learn from this exchange. You are all rock stars as this discussion is fantastic. Thank you, Alamance Arts and Elon University for showing leadership here.
Okay, great. I think to take away, I think our stories are one thing, but the same oppressions that we have had to battle to become ourselves are still weighing you down. They're still oppressing you. They're still, like, you are still being subject to those things. And just because they benefit you, they still limit you in other ways. And I think doing the work to figure out how they limit you and then to join in our collective liberation is what I want you to take away. Like, yes, our stories are great. And imagine who you could be without this heteronormative, white supremacist, all the isms, transphobic, like imagine who you could be and what you've had to negotiate. And like, who could you be if you did not have this in your life? And this is who we are with this in our life. So who could we be? What potential could we have? How many people feel like they could not live up to their potential, so they chose to check out of this world? Yes, yeah.
I'll add, I'm going to be very much more, like, not much more direct, but I have a very direct response. You gotta hold yourself accountable. And I think one of the things that I always think about as well is the work that dominant identity folks have to do in some of these spaces. And that's going to be putting yourself into uncomfortable conversations, uncomfortable spaces. It's going to be dealing with uncomfortable emotions, because when we talk about these complex issues such as racism, heterosexism, homophobia, whatever, a lot of the times that's going to elicit some really strong emotions. And I think the default response from a lot of folks that I've engaged with is to be defensive. Like, I'm not the racist, and that's not useful. And I think one of the things for me is, not only do you need to work on, the areas that you need to grow, like we all do, because, even with my, marginalized identities, there's still many spaces I need to grow. It's how are you doing the same and showing up for us when we're not watching? So what does it look like for your family? What does it look like for your friends? Are you silent in the meeting when somebody says something racist? Or are you going to say, absolutely, that's, whatever, and challenge that in that moment? Or are you going to be the person that comes to me afterwards? I'm so sorry that happened. I don't care that you're sorry that happened. Like, to be real, like, I needed you then. I don't need you now. So I really think it's thinking about those moments where you really can show up for us when we need it most. Continue learning and growing, because there's a lot of things out there, and never expect that you've arrived, because there is no such thing.
Ooh, I just wanted to add, in addition to that, I feel like this is just for all white people, is to read the room and know when you're taking up space, know when you're taking up too much space. I think, especially like the people that I've been around, they're like, I feel like if you just took a little bit longer to think about, a little bit longer, like, should I say this? Who hasn't spoken? Maybe it's all right if it's silence, like some people are just waiting to, get that courage to kind of speak up. But taking up space is a really, big issue. And especially like right now, like the times right now, there are voices that need to be at the center of all of the conversations, when we talk about, Black Lives Matter, when we talk about, Black trans lives matter, it's because we're not really part of the conversation. We need to be like at the front and center and remain that way. And I think space is a big thing.
Okay, thank y'all. So to close us out, in one sentence, which for people of color, that could be 5 minutes, what advice would you have for your younger self?
I can go. I'm still young, I feel like, but my young self, like my teenage self, I think that I would tell her that it's okay to just like freely and flowly just move through life as authentically as possible. I think that in the spaces that I grew up in, I wasn't allowed to kind of grow and learn and like mess up and try out different things because there's that issue of safety. There's the issue of not wanting to make my community look bad, because oftentimes I am the only person of color or the only queer person in the space. And so it's like that kind of invisible responsibility to kind of have to always put on your best at no matter where you are. And to tell that person that it's okay, literally, like, just focus on growing up, focus on finding out what like makes my heart feel warm, or focus on finding out like what drives me, like what I'm passionate about, things like that. Like, don't even worry about societal issues, because I've got my whole life to worry. At any point in my life, I can jump into the action, because there's always going to be action, because like this world is so screwed up that it's going to take years to unscrew it up and to make that change. So like at any point I can jump in and do the work, but to make sure I'm taking care of me first and making sure I have things in my life that genuinely make me happy and make me smile, because there's so much that is automatically already against me, like regardless, before like someone even meets me, like there's already some like hesitations or predispositions. So to just tell me, calm down, just move through. Yeah.
I think I would say to myself, like, girl, just do it. Like, don't take out those loans. Don't go get those degrees, because white systems of education are oppressive. So like, don't worry about that. Biphobia and being left out of the community is very real, but like, you still get to exist. So like, just do it. Like, just do you. Just go ahead and like, just go ahead. Like, do you, live your life, be who you are, be fat, be happy, take up the space. And just do it, because no one, and I promise you, no one is going to be with you to the end but you. Nobody's going to love you as much as you love you. And at the end of the day, if they're not going to fight you, what does it, or pay your bills or fly you out, what does it matter?
Find you, be you, cry, laugh, they'll adjust.
That was a Hallmark card.
Come on, Hallmark. Mine would be stop pretending for others, be yourself, and let people in.
I would tell myself it's okay to cry, even if I need to go find a private space. It is okay to let those tears out.
Thank y'all. Before turning it over to Roarie to close us out, we actually did get a question that came in, and I think it's a really good one, and so I just wanted to make space to ask it. How do you want or expect queer spaces to grow in Alamance post-pandemic? What is your dream space?
Go ahead. I think that like, just like, I don't know, I have kind of my little quarrels with making space, because it's kind of like inferring that like we're not, like the space isn't already like deserving of us to be there, and like we're not already there. Like we're already here. Like Kiah said, like we've been here, we didn't just show up, like I think it's a matter of like visibility and like comfortability. So like how can we make this space more comfortable for people to feel safe and feel the need, or feel have that want to like be out in public and be authentically them and things like that. So that starts by you know, challenging comments and things that are said in spaces that are racist, homophobic, like things like that, and asking questions. Like no one even has to say anything bad, but if you're in a space and you're noticing like, oh, there are some voices that aren't being represented or aren't being heard, like inquire about that. Or when we have to get in the habit of being like, okay, like what are the demographics here? Like, am I going to be safe here? Am I going to be seen here? Am I going to feel comfortable? You know, like, am I going to walk around and see people physically like me, or that I can have things in common with? Like, it's things like those. It's like the little things that we have to do daily, consistently, that will show the long-term change and like and that will have the lasting impact, I think.
Yeah, I think it's, no matter whether it's a bar, a club, an art supply place, I think there's two things that are part of my dream space. One is like welcome me, but like truly welcome me, embrace me. And then the second is that there are actual tangible consequences to the folks that do not do so.
I completely agree. The only addendum I would add is even thinking about the pandemic's not even the limiting factor here, right? So I don't think this is something that we have to wait for, because it shouldn't be something that we have to put things on pause for.
I don't hold a lot of hope in my heart necessarily for Alamance County. And that's no tea, no shade. I mean, but I got here and I was like, oh, Lord be offense. Because I mean, daily Alamance County lets me down, specifically and always Graham, but like on a daily. Like I saw there was a sit-in at the soda shop in downtown Graham recently, and so I don't hold much. And the irony of that is like it's right next to the Love is Love, like a wall art installation, and the like you belong or everyone whatever thing that I was like, delete it, because like right across the street from Confederacy, like girl, like keep it. So I don't hold like hope in my heart for like Alamance County. However, we still have to exist. We still have to exist. Like I may not hold necessarily like that. I may not hold out hope, and that's just because, you know, my therapist says, you know, got to work on optimism, but you know, she's not here. But I just feel like we should I just want there to be spaces where folks can exist happily and safely on a daily basis and are not used for your quotes and your like new coffee shop like installations, and they're not your just like friendly barista, like, oh my God, like I love him, like he's great. But if like he was out in the street and something happened, you would walk past because like that's none of your business, right? Like I don't want that, but I just want spaces where people can just be. And if you're not trying to be in that space with us, okay, cute, sis, like go home, like go be at your house or in your space. But I feel like people are so often so uncomfortable that they have to, like the response is like, I have to interrupt their happiness and like their joy and their existence, like with my anger and my repression and all of my like trauma. And so like my dream space includes a therapist for people who, you know, clearly have issues with me and my existence, because maybe you talk to somebody else and not eyeball me or follow me around the Aldi's or like make weird comments, you know, because you think like I'm not going to say anything or do anything. Like I just want to be able to shop here, person. And so at my dream space is where everybody has, you know, leaves us alone, leaves people alone, works out their trauma in their own space, and like just lets me go. Like, I didn't ask that you be my friend. I don't ask that you like hold my hand, you know. Yeah, almost like their joy is built on my oppression, but also you can catch these hands because I'm the one. So you could also catch a charge and we could all be up there. So how about it? But in my dream space, we mind our business, and you let me live my life and you live yours, and I can be happy in my space and you can be whatever in yours. And like, I just dream of a world where we all just minded our business and let people just be and exist as long as they're not causing you harm. And just be. But Alamance County, if we can ever get to just be, I'll be happy. I'll be happy.
Thank y'all, truly. I don't know what's greater than a rock stars, but y'all are all of it. My Aquarius sun tells me not to cry at how beautiful this space is, but my Cancer rising is like, it's been a year. It's okay to cry. So y'all are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Infinite thanks. So to close this out, turning it over to Roarie.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you all the panels for being vulnerable, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your energy. This is a lot. This is wealth and information, and these are very specific asks, and they're not even that hard. I hope with this exhibition that this is a step in the direction. This is not the end, this is just the beginning. And so I would like to invite everyone to see Jade's exhibition. It will be at Alamance Arts on May 17th. That's the first official day. There's nothing like seeing images in person. There's absolutely nothing like seeing Jade's work in person and in a large format. So I would invite you to come and see the work in person. And with that, we'll leave you to it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and sharing space, and especially for the panelists.
Protect your magic.